Today you're in the office of SPUC Scotland, which is the Society for Protection of Unborn Children.
We really started just before the 1967 Act was passed into law in the UK, as a way to kind of campaign and to raise our voices and raise the opposition against abortion.
In 1966, a Scottish politician called David Steele proposed a bill to allow abortion. It was said that many women were dying because of backstreet abortions. It was saying that society had many children that were unwanted, and it was necessary to have an abortion law. So at the same time when this was proposed, a person called Alan Smith wrote a letter into the Church of England Times, a church newspaper, and he called on all people who would be interested in trying to fight against the proposal.
Unfortunately, we lost that, and abortion was allowed for certain circumstances, and for the last 50 years we've been fighting and struggling against the culture of death that is really building momentum across our country. We're across the UK, and we also work in Ireland and the United Nations. Our main focus is to end abortion in Scotland and across the UK, and to campaign for the dignity of every human life, whether that's at the start of life or at the end of life.
The aim of our work is to work within society to promote the pro-life vision that every human life is important. We work in schools, we work in parishes, we work in the media, and we lobby politicians. And we work in a whole series of areas, all with the aim of introducing laws that protect every human life.
The 1967 Abortion Act is the main law that allowed abortion for certain circumstances. These include up until 24 weeks if it is deemed necessary for the woman's mental and physical health, or right up to birth if the doctor believes that there is some form of disability or illness with the baby, and for that reason you can have that right up to birth.
SPUC isn't a Catholic organisation, but it's one of the best friends and partners of the Catholic Church in the United Kingdom in trying to get across to our society, our civic society, the dignity of the unborn child. Probably in 50 years, if you look at the legislation that's gone through the Westminster Parliament, you might get a bit depressed and wonder, has the Catholic Church, SPUC, made much difference? But if you look wider, the pro-life message, the pro-life argument hasn't gone away. It's got stronger and stronger and stronger, and I think those who would be pro-abortion are probably surprised and perplexed that the pro-life cause is still so strong. And I would say, if anyone were to ask in the United Kingdom, why is that the case? Why is the pro-life message still so strong, still so resilient? They say two reasons: SPUC and the Catholic Church.
First thing, whenever you want to cover any topics, guys, always try to define it, okay? So abortion is the loss of pregnancy by artificial means. And just to make that clear, because I think Scotland is very unique in this, like in England as well. Often doctors would call a miscarriage an abortion, but it's totally different. I would have many family members and friends who have had a miscarriage. A miscarriage is something that can happen naturally for many different reasons. up to mostly up to 12 weeks of pregnancy, but really at any stage. If you would say to a girl who had a miscarriage or you had an abortion, it's very different.
In our world today, many people talk about abortion. They use euphemistic terms like termination of pregnancy, but we're quite clear of what abortion is, and we think the science backs it up. It's a tragedy. Abortion means the deliberate taking of a human life, the deliberate killing of a human life while it is fully human, but still in the womb it is most innocent and defenceless, the time when it's most full of richness and potential. Quite simply, abortion kills human beings. That's the tragedy of it.
They absolutely present it as if it's a choice that doesn't have a gravity to it and doesn't have a moral significance to it. So that's how it's presented to women. And it's not even posed as a difficult choice. It's posed as just another option on the table that you can take advantage of. And I think that undermines the actual moral weight of the issue and the importance of that and the importance of the consideration that goes into these choices.
When people talk about abortion in the UK and around the world, they talk about a woman's right to choose. But in reality, when we talk about choice, we're talking about a woman's right to choose to kill a child. And ultimately, we live in a society where there are restrictions for a reason. We can't have the choice to do anything we want. We have to have laws. Laws exist to protect people. And that's why the right to life, as recognised by the UN and the Human Rights Act in the UK, is so important, because without the right to life, there are no other rights. That is the foundation right that all other rights fall on.
Now, abortion facts, there's 33 abortions every single day in Scotland, there's 12,000 every single year, and I have to change that, it's 8.9 million now, so it is, that's gone up. So it's 8.9 million in the UK since 1967. How many students in the school? 800. There's 500 abortions every single day in the UK, in the whole of the UK. So you know, that's whatever, 66% of your student body gone every single day.
In Scotland there are about 12,000 abortions a year. So for our population that means out of every 5 pregnancies, 1 will end in abortion. So it's about a fifth. We have a slightly lower rate here in Scotland than in England, and that's because we don't have abortion clinics that are private. All of our abortions are done in National Health Service hospitals. So we do not have the same private marketing of abortion to the same extent as they have in England.
The effect of the 1967 Abortion Act in Scotland or in the United Kingdom 50 years later is 8 million babies not born. Now that is a colossal number. There are only 5 or 6 million people in the whole of Scotland.
If you take that on a global scale at the moment, the UN, the World Health Organization, estimates there were between 40 and 50 million abortions around the world, which is just staggering, which, if you look at it by itself, abortion is the leading cause of death, bar none. So cancer kills less people. Of course, there are lots of terrible things in the world like cancer and hunger and malaria, but abortion kills more of these combined.
I think that there has been a devaluing of human life. There's been a devaluing of the children. People are very anti-child. There is an anti-birth mentality. The fertility rate has collapsed, for example. People see the child now as something that's separate from relationships. So they think they can have a marriage or a relationship, but a child doesn't enter into it, because abortion and contraception, in fact, have been used to separate what was a natural part of a loving relationship in the past. So fertility rates have been greatly depressed, but we've also over the last 5 decades seen a massive rise in the child abuse. You know, so children are, we were promised that the Abortion Act would introduce an era where every child was a wanted child, and that would mean they would all be taken care of better. but the reality is they're not. You know, we've got more child abuse. We have many children now who can't be adopted. People have forgotten about adoption. Before, adoption would have been an opportunity, but it's unusual now for children to be available for adoption. So we have lots of parents who would want children, but those children simply don't exist.
It really amazes me, and I think it still surprises many people who have been involved with SPUC since the very beginning, that people really don't understand what the unborn child is, or the fact that they feel pain at 20 weeks, or by 10 weeks they've got the heartbeat going, they've got brainwaves, they've got hands, they've got arms. And if that isn't a human that deserves life and love as much as you or I, then what kind of society do we live in? I think since the Act, or since the law was introduced into UK, we've kind of lost touch with reality of what it means to be human, and we've also kind of switched ourselves off to what kind of is morally right, what's logical and what's scientific, because it's not just a religious issue. I think religious people do play an important part in the pro-life movement, but it's not just for religious people to be involved with the pro-life movement. If you believe in human rights, you believe in common sense, if you believe in logic, then you should really be pro-life.
Project Truth is a youth initiative of SPUC Scotland, so we take young people and we bring them out onto the streets of Scotland all over, you know, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, Dundee, lots of different towns and cities, and we bring the pro-life message to the people on the streets. Definitely you have to have some courage in the pro-life movement in Scotland today. We don't get too much hostility on the street. We get some people who don't agree with us and might like to shout, but most people you can have a proper conversation with, you know, but you definitely need to have some confidence to do it. And we give the guys some training before they go out on the street as well, in order to know the argument. You need to know what you're talking about when you're doing it, and you also need to, we concentrate quite a lot on the compassionate side, so people who are in crisis pregnancies who need help, we know where to send them for that, we know how to help them, we know how to be compassionate towards them, and also people who have had abortions themselves. We need to train the young people to be compassionate towards them and know how to help them as well. And on the roadshow this year, we got a lot of women who opened up about their own abortion experiences, and we just want to say that we are here and we can help you. And it can be in big groups, I guess, the other side can be quite hostile towards you, but the more we are confident, the more we are out there, the more we are educating the public is good. And I always talk about, you have really pro-life people on this side, you have sort of really pro-abortion people on this side, but you have a lot in the middle who haven't actually thought about it, and Project Truth aims to speak to the mountain in the middle, as I like to call it. We want to engage with them, and if there is anything that they don't know about the development of the baby, then we can tell them about that, and they can make their own decision on whether that is right or ethical. And we try to just obviously come from the point of view that life begins at conception, so we try to lead them towards that way of thinking.
When we're on the streets talking to people, older people, they don't know the child is alive in the womb. They don't know any development stages. There's so much, well, not ignorance, but there's so much knowledge that was lost. So that's the big thing, is now we shine the light of truth on that, and the young people, hopefully they gather towards that, because they all are human, they like human rights, they want equality. So you highlight the inequalities of the law, of the abortion. The
young people are all volunteers, and they're usually university students studying, and basically they are really passionate about pro-life issues, so they come to us and they want to help in some way. Project Truth is a great platform for them to get involved in the pro-life movement, because you're with like-minded people, you're with friends, and it's easy to engage with the public when you're with a group of people who can support you to do that. Whereas sometimes it can be quite hostile. If you're in university, sometimes you feel like you're alone and you're yourself. So they want to come on Project Truth to become more confident in speaking about the issues. And the idea is, hopefully, when they are more confident, they will go back into their universities or places of work, and they will take the pro-life message with them as well. So the future doctors or future lawyers, future teachers will be taking pro-life values into their professions with them as well.
My main responsibility is with the schools. I go into a lot of schools and I give different talks, from reproductive relationships, which is like a chastity talk, wait till marriage, why wait. Then we have their abortion, new life talk. We have prenatal development talk. We have euthanasia and assisted suicide talk. And we have embryo care, which looks at embryo experimentation, fertilization, like IVF, all of that. We say we're proposing the truth. I have my Project Truth hoodie on. And like that's it, we are proposing the truth to them, but in a gentle, attractive and courageous way, and they like it. And you treat them with respect and dignity the way we all want to be treated, you know. 1 of 2 million and 1 of 400 million. So 2 million by 400 million, who's good at maths? No? It's okay, I wasn't good at maths either. Okay, if you ask Siri on your phone, what is 2 million by 400 million? She will say it's 800 trillion. So guys, the chance of you being here, you're not just 1 in a million, you're 1 in 800 trillion. The chance of you being here is astronomical. It's amazing. I love that word, astronomical, right? So it goes past a little bit, this little girl at 12 weeks, you can pass her around, have a look, there you go, yeah, I was a baby. Okay. It might be the first and only time they hear the pro-life message. I will definitely be probably the only time they hear about chastity, theology of the body, and why wait until marriage. So many of the young people don't understand, never heard this. They never heard this option of waiting till marriage. Why would you wait? That was something I can share myself, because I had the pleasure of waiting till marriage with my wife, and I used to joke, you know, I'm a 27-year-old virgin, you know, and they say, oh my God, he's a 27-year-old virgin, you know, don't touch him, he's got virginity. And I say, no, it's okay, your virginity is not a disease, you know, nobody dies of virginity. So it's, and it helped them. It's not about virginity. If you already have been in a relationship and have been sexually active, you can make a new choice now to wait for the right person. And who is the right person? The person you marry. And this is an amazing story. Baby Linley, the baby who was born twice. This happened in England last year. Baby Linley here had a big tumour growing on her butt, okay? And it would have ended her life because it was putting too much pressure on her little heart. So at 23 weeks of pregnancy, the surgeon removed her from the womb. She was born, and they cut off the tumour, and then they put her back inside her mother, and the mother carried her till 37 weeks. So she has 2 birthdays. She has 2 birth certs. How cool is that? Now, the reason I like using Baby Linley is I was at a school. There was this big posh school, and they had a debate, and there was this embryologist there, and the embryologist was saying, you're only a human being when you're born into being. And I'm like, what textbooks does it say that in, you know? Like, okay, you're only human when you're born. Okay, so Baby Linley, was she a human being the first time she was born? Or was she a human being the second time she was born? And it's like that game you play, where's the baby? There's the baby. Where's the baby? There's the baby, you know? Like, you're a human being. Baby Linley, human in there, human out here. Human back in there, human back out here. And like, is this, you know, that's it, you're human, full stop. The embryologist didn't like me, we didn't make friends. It's amazing when you think of it. After one talk, you could have one person there in that group who decide not to have an abortion. So that's 1 life saved. And you could be a policeman, you could be a fireman all your life, and you might never save anybody. So you don't know. We don't really see, sometimes people come back and say, thank you, I didn't have an abortion because I heard about the child in the womb. I didn't know the child was a child in the womb. Thought it was just a blob of cells, but now I know. So they see the humanity of the child in the womb in primary school, and that will stay with them. And who knows, maybe they might not become actively pro-life, but they might decide themselves they'll never have an abortion. So that's a good. From the moment of conception, you are a human life with potential, not a potential human life. You're not going to be a giraffe, you're not going to be an orangutan or a flower or whatever. You're going to be human. If something is growing, it's alive. If something has a human mother or a human father, it must be human. 2 humans don't have a butterfly, okay? So 8 weeks, you're 1/2 inch long, right? You got brain waves are measured. All body systems are present at 8 weeks. Your brain waves, you practice moving, thumb sucking. It's like all this, you know, you've already got another 30 weeks to go, right? Just been lost. It wasn't given to their parents. It wasn't proposed to their parents. So then how can their parents propose it to their children? Also, there is a shortage of RE teachers in Scotland. There are so many vacant RE teacher positions. There's just so few of them. And also, what are we teaching? And a lot of teachers, they have a course to cover, a syllabus. And maybe that doesn't include sex and marriage. That doesn't include exactly the pro-life message. So it can be tricky. But they like getting the outside speaker to take, because it's a hot topic. So it's easier for an outside speaker than that. And thank goodness SPUC are here to do this, because if we were not here, who would do it? You know, there'd be nobody. They will never hear the message. So that's the main thing. They have to hear it. They have to see that it's realistic, and that the person giving the message is happy, you know, normal and happy.
Most of my remit is working with young people. So one of the biggest things, which is an SPUC initiative, but London organises it, is the SPUC Youth Conference. So I would organise a group of people there in Scotland to take them to the youth conference. So this year in March we had 50 young people come from Scotland to go down there, which is a great number. So we can see that lots and lots of young people are wanting to get involved. And I think the year before that was about 24, so we really almost doubled in numbers with that. But also there is the March for Life UK, which takes place normally in Birmingham in England, and we would take a group of people from Scotland down there, so a bus load or whatever. So we had a full bus this time, and also 2 cars as well, full of people. There was a mix of different people. There was a lot of young people came, but also people of different age groups came as well. So it was really good. So we cooperate with them and liaise with them, and obviously bring people to the march and trying to make it as big as possible. And over the last few years it has definitely grown to be very big. There's a good few thousand at that this year, and it started off with maybe a few hundred. We learned so much from the Americans in the March for Life in Washington. We brought 12 students from college students, and most of these students were denied the right to have a pro-life group in their university. So we said, okay, you're not allowed to have a pro-life meeting, you're not allowed to have a pro-life mass or a vigil, nothing pro-life on your campus. They're allowed to have communists on the campus, they're allowed to have anything else on the campus. No pro-life, because they were endangering women's uteruses. And so we said, okay, come, we'll bring you to America. So we brought these young people. They only had to pay like £100. They had 6 days, 6 nights in America. We went to the best conferences, heard some of the most amazing speakers from all over the world. Most of them were American. And we marched with 700,000 people down like in the same footsteps as Martin Luther King and all these guys. And we marched in their same footsteps for human rights for the unborn. And when you're part of that movement, these college students who, you know, you can't have a pro-life group, but now there are 700,000 of us here on the streets of Washington. We're not alone in this fight. We are right in this fight, and we want to keep moving forward. We have the Torchlight Procession here in Glasgow, and that was organised for many, many years by another organisation. But since last year, SPUC has taken over organising this event, so we meet in George Square in Glasgow in the centre. We would start the thing with Rosary, and then we would have a march that would go normally from George Square to St Andrew's Cathedral, Catholic Cathedral, and then we would have someone celebrate Mass. The Torchlight Procession, I guess, is a more Catholic event, so it attracts a lot of Catholics to that event, and people you might not see at other events, whereas other things like conferences may attract a different network of people. It's trying to keep everybody involved but link them together within the pro-life movement.
Human life begins at conception, and it ends when we take our last breath. It really is as simple as that. That's why the protection of human life has to be from the womb to the tomb. That has always been the view of the Church, it's always been the view of SPUC. But in the last 50 years, every scientific development has backed us up. Now all of the latest technologies that are able to show under the microscope and the electron microscopes what happens at the moment of conception shows very clearly, demonstrably, there is no doubt whatsoever human life begins at conception.
And look at this. This was only caught on camera last year by some scientists. Look at this. This is amazing. At the moment of conception, when the sperm and the egg become one, they found out there's a bright flash. This was done with artificial insemination in an IVF clinic. And the embryos who have a small flash, they're discarded. They're not quality. But guys, so that's an artificial insemination. But when you were conceived naturally, like that flash would have been so bright, so beautiful. It'd be very hard to capture on camera, you know. It'd be a bit awkward, wouldn't it? You know. Okay.
The unborn from the earliest stages of development is a human. It's separate from its mother, it's distinct and it's living. And so it's important that we understand that it has humanity from the very early stages, even if it doesn't look like you or I.
You're genetically complete at the moment of conception. Like that, nothing has been added or subtracted to you from the moment you're a zygote. So like any of our textbooks, but it's how you propose that. We have to be also charitable, because someone, a pro-abortion person, might say, oh, it's not a human, it's not alive. Well, you say, well, what do you mean? Do you mean it's not biologically human, or is it not philosophically human? Like, is it a person yet? Because biologically, you're human. You know, a human man and a human woman don't have a cat. They have a baby human. So it's just like that, be charitable. They might say something really, you know, strange or stupid, say, you know, it's not human, but it is. But it's like that, be charitable, be kind to them, and you propose it, not impose. Be like the butterfly and not like the wasp. They both pollinate the flowers, but when you see a wasp flying around, you're like, oh, if that wasp comes near me, I'm going to kill it. But if the butterfly's there, oh, look at the beautiful butterfly, you're attracted to the colour of it, and you want to catch the butterfly. So they both pollinate the flowers, but you want to be like that. You want to be the attractive person, not the going around stinging people, you know, zzz, you know. So it's like that, how we propose the truth, not impose it.
If we look through our history, some of the greatest mistakes and disasters to befall humanity have been made precisely with that distinction. There is a human being, there is human life, but it's not a person. Therefore, we can do what we like with it. It's very important that we say, where there's human life, there is a person, therefore there is absolute dignity and inviolable rights.
We know that pro-abortionists in Scotland are looking to expand the provision of abortion. They also want to lengthen the time limits for abortion. They ultimately want abortion to birth and for any reason.
We've reached a point in 2017 in Scotland where abortion's been around for 50 years, but there are certain policymakers and politicians, but also worryingly health professionals, the midwives, and the British Medical Association, which is the main trade union in support of doctors, who now want to decriminalise abortion and push it even further. And that's just, for me, abhorrent, because that goes against the principle of what it means to be a medical practitioner. Doctors and midwives that I talk to and friends that I have at home tell me that they go into medicine because they want to heal people, they want to help people. But my message is that abortion doesn't help anyone. You're just getting rid of a baby, you're destroying a life, you're causing more damage.
At first it seems strange because we expect doctors to protect life, but if you think about it, they're the people who've been doing it, so they are compromised, and I think a lot of them, the premise that they are killing an innocent human being is too terrible for them to think about. So I think they justify it in their own minds that they're doing good, and they want the rest of society to agree with them that they're doing good, so that it quietens their conscience. That's my view. I think it's people with a damaged conscience, and they have a grim determination to extend abortion and have no stigma attached to it whatsoever.
I think it's important to realise that when those that support abortion talk about decriminalisation, we on the pro-life side and we at SPUC don't believe in criminalising when we think that these are women that need support and love and nurture, and that when they find themselves in these difficult circumstances, we want to help them. And it's not they themselves need to be criminalised, but the doctors who are obviously providing and performing the abortions that are the people that need to be prosecuted.
They want to remove the role of medics, but at the same time they also want to undermine the rights of conscience for those medics who disagree. So for example, SPUC supported 2 midwives who were told that they had to cooperate in abortion, and for many years they had been permitted to do their job without being involved in the abortions, but they increasingly come under pressure to do so. And unfortunately that case went to the Supreme Court and they lost. So midwives now are in a very vulnerable position if hospitals force them, because they have no legal protection and they have to choose between their conscience or their employment.
Sadly, more and more we're discovering that it's not just the child in the womb who's the victim of abortion. The victims of abortion are mothers and fathers and siblings and society. Sadly, the suffering of abortion is the only suffering we may not speak of. There are many women who are mothers who had abortions who regret it, who bitterly regret it, who are languishing in all kinds of mental anguish, but they're not allowed to talk about it because no one's allowed to say that abortion is wrong. And I think part of our task in pointing out the right to life of the unborn child and the evil and the sadness of abortion is it opens our way to be able to deal mercifully, therapeutically, in a healing way with many, many people who are suffering as indirect victims of abortion.
Hello, Abortion Recovery Care and Helpline. Can I help you? Yeah, okay. Well, listen, just before we go any further, my name's Claire, right? And even if this is the only time that we speak, I just want to let you know that anything we talk about is completely confidential, you know, with the usual legal limits that if you say anything that suggests that you or someone else is at risk, then we'd need to discuss that. And also, if there was a court case, which has never happened, you know, to me, but I just need to make you aware of that. But apart from being confidential, it's also completely non-judgmental. Okay, I'm not here to judge you or anyone else we speak about. So do you want to give me a wee more of an idea of why you called us today?
As part of the SPUC family, we also have a service run from Glasgow, which is called ARCH, which is Abortion Recovery Care and Helpline, and we help women who've had abortions, but we also take calls from women who are in crisis pregnancies, and we try to give them advice in working with other organisations to ensure they get the support to allow them to have their child.
Mostly women that phone, but also 10% of our calls are from men as well. So anyone at all who is negatively affected can phone the helpline and they can speak to, we have befrienders on the line on a rota system from 7 o'clock in the evening to 10 o'clock at night, and they can phone and chat to them and tell them how they are feeling, and they can support them and be there and listen, because quite a lot of the time people don't open up about their abortions. They could have had them, you know, last week, last month, 20 years ago, but sometimes they feel that there's no one to talk to. So ARCH is the listening ear to help people, you know, get that off their chest. But also, if people need further counselling in the office in Glasgow, we can offer counselling, whether it's telephone, face-to-face, or video call as well. We can offer help and support to those who need it.
We don't just care about the baby, we care about the woman. we offer her money. We also care about the doctor who has to perform the abortion, the midwife who has to perform the abortion, to clean up, to help, assist in the abortion. We also care for, we care for everybody, all of society, grandparents, or those who would have been grandparents, and the family that are affected as well. So abortion leaves a big scar on society, and it's for us to try and heal that, and also to stop it. We don't want that scar anymore.
Some women are told by clinics, don't Google it, right? Which to me is, doesn't really pass as informed consent. Unfortunately, a lot of the research isn't great because it's such a politicised topic for a start. But a lot of the research that says, oh, most women are fine, most women are, just feel relief or don't regret their abortion, they might only be months afterwards. They might be, I think there's one that's gone up to 5 years later. But we get calls from women after 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So there's been no studies that have followed women throughout their life. And those women might think that they've been okay during that time, and then something happens, they find out they can't have another child, they have a grandchild, or another loss, their parents die, something just brings it all out, and it can be post-traumatic stress that's then triggered, and it all comes crumbling down, and then they can look back and realise maybe they've done things in those years that they hadn't linked to the abortion. And maybe they've had depression, anxiety, they've abused alcohol, drugs, they've gone from one relationship to another, they've thrown themselves into their work to the detriment of their personal life. All of these things are things that can happen.
The main kind of group in Scotland in particular that have abortions are women who come from deprived areas, poorer areas, women who find themselves through no fault of their own in kind of financial difficulty, and that accounts for double the amount of abortions compared to more kind of wealthy areas. And so SPUC, and as a civilised and progressive country, Scotland should really be focusing on providing help and support to these women who find themselves in difficult circumstances, rather than giving them the option to kill the child, because abortion isn't an easy decision, and abortion isn't the option of any woman. Girls don't grow up thinking, when I'm older I want to have an abortion. They think, I would love to be married and have a child and grow up. But they find themselves in difficult circumstances, and I think it's our job as Scots, but as a government, I think the Scottish Government should be doing more to ensure that resources are available for women who find themselves in difficult financial and mental situations.
I would never ever say to a woman, that you've killed. I would never say that. The thought doesn't even enter my head, but that's what women say about themselves. Now, some of them will think that beforehand. But there's a lot of ambivalence of, on the one hand, they're thinking, how can I do that? I thought I would never do that. And then on the other hand, everyone's telling them it's okay, and they're in that place of threat. So if you're in, it's very easy for us to blank out a lot of information, and a lot of women will talk about being an autopilot. I knew I just had to do it, so I was on autopilot, which again, your brain will help you do. So yes, it is legal. There are a lot of women who have said I shouldn't have been allowed to do that. I shouldn't have been given that choice. And these are women's words. This isn't what I'm saying. This is what they say, and they'll say, as I say, a lot of them will say, I killed my baby or I murdered my baby, and I shouldn't get away with it. So they want to be punished, but it's almost like they've been. I think a very appropriate word for it is they've been missold abortion, because they've been told it's this one thing, and then they go through it and discover it's not, it's something completely different than they were led to believe.
Hands up if you know someone who had a cleft palate. Anyone know anyone with a cleft palate? Yeah? Well, see, a cleft palate, it looks, that looks sore, but actually it requires just some surgery, depends on the situation, but some surgery and then it's all fine. So there's a few famous actresses who also had cleft palates, but they've actually had a little scar removed as well, and they also do their makeup in a good way. You can't tell, but that's it. But the reason I show you cleft palate, there's about 30 young children aborted every single year because they have a cleft palate. The parents don't know they have a cleft palate, they just know there's something not right with my child isn't perfect. Who is perfect, certainly not me.
For the doctors, it has been seen that abortion is on demand, so they're not following the law. So we believe that under the Abortion Act there are several different grounds, but ground C is for social abortions, and that is if the continuation of pregnancy is of a greater harm to the woman than having an abortion. But there is no psychological assessment taking place, so pretty much a woman can come forward and say, yeah, I'm going to commit suicide, something as silly as that. And the head of BPAS, which is the biggest private abortion provider, Anne Furedi, she has said that. She has said women go through the pretense of saying, oh yeah, I'm going to kill myself if I'm not having an abortion. And she said it's just a pretense. And that's why they're campaigning to have abortion completely decriminalised, so there would be no criteria that the doctor had to ensure were satisfied. But just now, we believe Ground C is being misused because there is great danger to women who have abortions. Some evidence has shown that women who've had abortions are 6 times as likely to commit suicide. So there's very alarming evidence that abortion is harmful, but doctors are not taking that into consideration when they're just giving women who request an abortion. That's not how the law should be working, and we believe over 98% of abortions are being performed outside the provisions of the law.
I know I've had more information having minor operations than a lot of women have had having abortions, and that when I started here, the 2 things that shocked me most and continued to get me are people saying, no one told me it would be like this. If I'd known it was going to be like this, I wouldn't have done it. And it wasn't my choice. It wasn't my decision. I wanted to keep my baby, but he wouldn't let me, or someone else, another family member, pressurised them. So that there does seem to be a systematic lack of information. I mean, even if you look at the abortion providers' websites, you could pick holes in it. Absolutely no bother at all, but they all say the same thing and they all refer back to the same papers. But I think they need to have a really long, hard look at what are they actually doing, where are their ethics, and are they helping women by keeping the truth from them? There's a campaign, part of the campaign to decriminalise abortion uses the phrase, we trust women. You think, well, brilliant, if you trust them, tell them the truth. Tell them the truth, stop hiding it from them, because you're not helping them.
Well, I think this narrative is important for them, because if it's not seen as a human right, and then you start to try and understand the rights of the child involved and start to see the unborn child as human, it becomes reprehensible and it becomes impossible to defend. So if you brand it as a woman's right as opposed to taking the life of a child, it becomes something that's irrevocable as opposed to something reprehensible.
We get calls from all over the country. So in Scotland it tends to be in hospitals and NHS clinics, but in England it can be in private clinics that are paid for by the NHS, the sort of big abortion providers. So the typical thing I hear is that women go along thinking someone's going to sit them down and talk over their options and talk about what's worrying them, and that doesn't happen. It's just a case of, when they've turned up, so many women describe it like a conveyor belt. But they also feel, even some who've asked for sort of counselling beforehand, again from different parts of the country, have said that it's almost as if the counselling is just designed to make it feel okay to go ahead. It's not about actually letting them explore what they're thinking or feeling. Now, that's only the ones I've heard of. I'm not saying everybody's like that. But there is this sense of it's made very easy. Options aren't discussed. I mean, I think if a woman is seeking an abortion because she's worried about finances, then the obvious, logical, ethical thing to do is to help her find information about what her financial situation would be, not to book her into a clinic, without actually exploring that. Or if a woman is feeling under pressure from someone else, the answer isn't to book her into a clinic. The answer is to help her deal with that pressure. If it's an abusive relationship, help her get away from the abusive relationship. You don't solve it by booking her in for an abortion, but that sadly is the reality. So often people don't know. They might go along to a clinic thinking someone's going to discuss their options, and it just doesn't happen. They might be in a situation where they can't discuss it with their family because maybe they haven't told them, that they're pregnant, or everyone's just saying, oh, it's your decision, I'll support you whatever you do, or things like that. So there are a lot of charities over the country for crisis pregnancies, but not enough, and not enough giving really practical and emotional support.
We're not a Catholic organisation, but most of our supporters, I'd probably say about 99% of our supporters are actually Catholic. There's a lot that are Christian as well. We do have some who have no faith at all. But yeah, we would do things that our supporters enjoy and want to participate in as well, and all of our staff at the moment in the office are Catholic. It's not always been the case, but at the moment we're all Catholics.
What SPUC is able to do in not defining itself as a faith institution but as a civic institution is to point out that you don't need to have faith to realise that the life of a child in the womb is a human life. All you have to have is a brain. All you have to have is eyes. All you have to do is to look at the science. That this isn't principally a faith or a religious issue. It's a human rights issue. It's a civic issue. Anyone with time and intelligence can see, and I think that's important. SPUC are a human rights organisation because the humanity of the child is there for all to see.
The reason that I'm pro-life is partly because of my upbringing as a Catholic, because my Catholic faith teaches me the responsibility to look after my neighbour and love my neighbour, and there's no more vulnerable neighbour than the unborn child. But also because I studied law at university and I specialised in human rights, and I realised that it's a human right. We're all human and we all deserve the right to life, and without the right to life then there are no other rights. And so because of my faith background, but even if I didn't have that, I think I would come to the realisation that we all have the right to life. But now that I've started working for SPUC, my eyes have even been opened to the harm and damage that's been caused physically, mentally, spiritually to women across the country because of abortion. And it's sort of a taboo, a hidden subject, and the more that women come out and to share the damage that's been caused by them, then the more that policymakers and people in this country will realise that abortion isn't an option, it's a terrible decision that is being made. We do say on our website that we'll help people, mentally, emotionally and spiritually. Often callers will mention God, and if they're on to the befrienders and they mention God, then the befrienders will ask them a wee bit about that. A lot of the befrienders have their own faiths as well, so some callers will ask for prayers, and some of the befrienders will even say a prayer with them on the line, but it's not obligatory, obviously. People will often mention God, and I'll try and get their understanding of it. And yes, I think it's a big help to women if they have faith in terms of their their sort of healing journey. It can seem like an obstacle because they think they're going to be punished by God and that God can't forgive them. Or others think, no, I know God can forgive me, but I can't forgive myself. But certainly their faith can be a real help, in terms of even broader questions of where they think that baby is now. If they have faith, then that opens up a whole range of possibilities of ways of looking at it that can be really comforting and helpful.
This is Stephen, and Stephen has, what do you think? Down syndrome, yeah. And if you know anyone who has Down syndrome, I had a great pleasure working with young adults and adults with disabilities, and Down syndrome was one of them, and those guys are amazing. Like, they have an extra chromosome. They have one more chromosome than we have, and I think I would call that the love chromosome, because they're so loving and caring, and they're also, they get up to devilment as well. They're rascals as well. But Stephen is our little poster boy. He's fantastic. But Stephen's very fortunate because 1 in 10 Down syndrome kids survive. 9 out of 10 are aborted in this country. In Iceland and Sweden, there's been no children born with Down syndrome, I think, for the last 2-3 years, at least. So like 100% are being wiped out, you know.
We get calls from men, again, either before or after. At one point last year, about 10% of our calls were from men. And it's interesting, I think men are in a really difficult position a lot of the time. They might have a view that they don't want the woman to have an abortion, but they feel they can't even say that. Or what happens more often is that the man has intentionally or otherwise pressurised the woman into having an abortion, and then sees what's happened to her afterwards and is, again, you know, full of remorse and, you know, what can I do? How can I help her? I had no idea it was going to be like this. Or they didn't really want it to happen and they feel the loss. And one thing I've noticed, which I think is interesting, and we're not talking large numbers, so it's not, you know, a representative sample, but for the women, if it's been a recent, you know, if they phoned us and the abortion's been quite recent, what they've lost is a baby, you know, and they'll talk about, the word they use most often is baby. You know, occasionally they'll say fetus or child, but most often it's baby. And they'll talk about that they've killed their baby, and you know, but they're missing their baby, and they want to be pregnant again. That's a huge problem, and nobody tells them that beforehand. That a lot of women all want to be pregnant again. For the man, it's like he's lost the child that was going to, you know, that was going to be born and grow up and do things like play football or whatever. And I suppose that makes sense, but that's just what I've noticed anecdotally, that when men are grieving, it's not the baby that they've lost, it's the child, which makes sense. But for women, it's much more immediate. So yeah, men lose out as well and grieve as well, and then feel the relationship just changes so much. You know, how do you can't go back on that if you've played a part in coercing or pressurising someone into doing something, and then their life's completely different. It's very, very difficult.
SPUC fights for the dignity of every human person, whether that's the unborn baby or whether that's through protecting the embryo or IVF, and SPUC works to campaign to reduce but also end IVF. We also are with the Catholic Church in Scotland, the leading organisation that's fighting against the introduction of euthanasia and assisted dying. And as soon as you introduce assisted dying in society, it becomes a duty to die, and the most vulnerable are targeted, as we've seen all around the world where it has been introduced. And so SPUC would fight against euthanasia, not just because it's the taking of life, but because it also puts burdens on the most vulnerable and the elderly in society.
There are lots of areas in which the current state of affairs infringes on the life and the rights of individuals and of people, and I think end-of-life care is a particularly important one. And I think while we're fighting for the rights of the unborn, we shouldn't forget the elderly and the infirm and people who are suffering from terminal illness, because there are so many pressures and different forces of coercion on them as well. And I think that we need to strive to protect them and to provide the best for them in their pain and in their suffering, and make it so that they feel that their life has worth.
Abortion in Scotland has actually been declining for a few years. You know, there are blips that take it up, but it has been declining. And we've also managed to repel several attempts to introduce assisted suicide, where we mounted very large campaigns, so that without those campaigns we would have assisted suicide, and we would have all the problems that are happening in Belgium and Holland and Switzerland. But we've been spared those just now, so we are keeping up the pro-life fight across the spectrum, and we think that we can win on abortion as well as we won on assisted suicide.
Yes, I do think there's most definitely a need for informing. I think a lot of people are ambivalent towards the issue and they separate themselves from it. So they say, oh, I don't really care about that, that doesn't pertain to me, so I don't need to think about it. And I think it's important to get out there and inform people because so many people don't understand the extent to which this is a problem. And I think lots of people like to ignore the issue because it's an unpleasant one. So it's important to go out and continue to push the point and get people to understand that this is a grave and important issue.
What we're trying to do is show them that there is a plan. We have a plan that we are following where we're targeting key areas of civic society. And if you explain to people the pathway that we think we can move along to try and awaken society to the right to life, that we can have success. And we have many more young people getting involved in our work. Many people who are lawyers and doctors are contacting us now, and we're able to provide them with support and legal advice on how to live a life which is completely coherent and pro-life.
Well, I mean, the people have an influence, don't they? I mean, we live in what's supposed to be a country that has representation of the people. And so, yes, absolutely, the constituents should be able to lobby their politicians and get them to make a change and get them to hear the voices of people.
I think once a particular country or a particular society begins to recognise or promote a certain way of life, such as abortion, then it really opens it up for other countries, other societies to think that it's normal, and it kind of desensitizes people to realise that it is taking off a human life.
Beware of wolves in sheep's clothing. Many people come saying it's just the exception for the most difficult cases. It's a lie. It is a way in to abortion on demand, and it will not stop in its logic until it gets there. So I think what you have to say is, if a human being in the womb is a human being, if it is a person, nothing, no circumstance, no reason allows you or legitimises you taking that person's life.
Since we've had abortion for 50 years in Scotland, and in the UK, it's become normalised. People begin to just see it as second nature, and if someone said, oh, I had an abortion, passing in conversation, it would just be part of a conversation. People aren't shocked anymore, and I think as soon as you introduce any form of abortion, whether it's just for the most extreme case ever, it opens a can of worms. It makes it dangerous for everyone else. And so we work with people at SPUC who come from the most horrendous backgrounds and difficult circumstances and abusive partners, but ultimately, that doesn't give you the right to take someone's life. Like, we want to be there. For us at SPUC, the pro-life movement is built on two principles: love and compassion. We have love for the unborn child and think that they deserve the right to life as all of us do. And it's also built on compassion. Compassion for the mother who might find herself and the family in a difficult circumstance. So we really want to say, continue loving, continue showing the compassion that you have for your mothers and for your unborn children, and to protect them because they are the future generation. We need these people in our society.